Good morning, Ohio State fans. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Tuesday, November 25th. We are a few days now into Hate Week, into the week of the game. And, we're counting down the days. We're more excited for this than Thanksgiving or Black Friday or anything else that could be going on this week. Nothing compares to Ohio State versus Michigan. And to talk about what we saw coming out of last week's game going into this week's game, I am joined once again by our film guru at 11 Warriors, Mr. Kyle Jones. Jones, is the hatred coursing through your veins yet? Are you feeling the hype around the rivalry already?
Yeah, I'm team stuffing. And I think this is the week that people really start to put their hate on display. This is my favorite week of the year, like hands down. I'm a Thanksgiving guy. I'm not nothing against Christmas, but this is my favorite week. So we get to add this plus that little college football game that's happening on Saturday. This is really the week I look forward to all year long. So couldn't be happier for it to finally be here.
I have to say, I was a late adopter to stuffing, but it's grown on me quite fondly into adulthood. It's always welcome at every Thanksgiving meal I have. Before we jump in, what is your most what do you think is the most overrated Thanksgiving? We have a lot of food debates around Thanksgiving at 11 Warriors every year, so I feel like you may have already answered this in
Oh yeah,
Slack. But what is your most overrated Thanksgiving dish?
mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
Like just plain mashed potatoes. Like, come on, spice it up a little bit. Like, there's so much more on the plate we can do. Like, I make a sweet potato mash. Give me some stuffing. Like mashed potatoes are just like there. I mean, the other thing I would say is like cranberry sauce is legit good. And if you don't
Yeah.
if you don't like the cranberry sauce on your plate, I'm sorry, I can't trust your palate on anything ever. Like you're a child. Sorry. That's the rule.
All right. Fair enough. I haven't forayed into the cranberry sauce just because, you always get that canned texture and it just, kind
Oh,
of
so you need to get
dissuades
the
me a little bit.
real, like the
Yeah.
homemade stuff. Like you need to get that because then you get the nice acid to match all the like salt and fat on the plate. Like it's a whole thing.
Fair enough. But yeah, I think that's a good answer. With all the various carb offerings that you have at Thanksgiving, I'd much rather like go with mac and cheese or something over mashed potatoes. Even though I think well-made mashed potatoes are very good, but by and large, it's probably a more bland option relative to a lot of stuff on
High
the
floor, low
table. So
ceiling. Let's be real. High floor, low ceiling with mashed
that's
potatoes.
that's a good way to put it. And if you feel any differently, feel free to let us know in the comments of this video. Before we get into a preview of what the film study that will drop on Thanksgiving, while we're on the subject of Thanksgiving, so you have that to look forward to as you tide yourself over waiting for NFL or early dinner or whatever else you may be looking forward to on that holiday. You will be able to watch film study at midday on Thursday, courtesy of Mr. Jones. So you have that to look forward to, but we'll preview it for you on today's Dubcast as we always do. But before we get into that, we do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor at the 11 Dubcast this Ohio State football season, as well as at 11 Warriors. That would be First Bank of Central Ohio. From game day to work day, First Bank of Central Ohio is proud to support the business owners that keep Central Ohio thriving. They're locally owned, business focused, and always in your corner. Give them a visit at fbcentralohio.com. Now, I was talking to Jones pre-show, and I was commenting on how we have obviously observed that this is typically our most anticipated episode of the Dubcast every week this season by far, but the ones that have done the best among even those have always been Matt Patricia ruins the day of the other team, and this is how he did it. And Jones was very happy to see that given that the big talking point going into this game was Ohio State's offense should have its way with Rutgers' defense. The more understated side of this was that Rutgers quietly has a very, very good offense, close to the top 40, certainly within the top half. And Ohio State's defense has obviously overcome every single offensive challenge that has been thrown at it this year. And they did so once again. They ruined Greg Schiano's day on Saturday. So I know that Jones is chomping at the bit to talk about everything that the offense did very well, including one Mr. Caleb Downs and the poetic ending to his regular season career at Ohio State. But before we jump into that, I would be remiss if I did not bring up a question that Chase Brown posed at the end of the Dubcast yesterday that I promised him I would bring upon to you on today's episode, and that's that there's a bit of a split opinion among both fans and people covering the team alike, even within our own circle, about what happened with the receiving room in this game, given that Tate and Smith were out, and that we really, like, Brandon Innes had 2 receptions, I think, for 10 yards, and a guy named Adolph had a great senior day, but, by his own standards relative to the rest of the production he's had in his career, I think it was 2 catches for 23 yards. And I don't think a receiver caught a pass until probably well into the second quarter, if that, of this game. It was the Max Klare show. Like this, we've seen Max Klare's had a handful of good games this year, but this was by far his best performance to this point in the season. First 100-yard receiving game in Ohio State tight end has had since I was at Ohio State, going all the way back to Jeff Hireman in 2013. So, given all of that, there's been a talking point that, this receiver room is weak, even behind Smith and Tate, relative to the lofty expectations that Brian Hartline has set of late. But Chase was wondering yesterday if the product of what happened with the receivers in this game was more by them just deliberately trying to make Max Klare the focal point of the aerial attack throughout the game, as opposed to, or not as opposed to, but in recognizing that the 2 best receivers weren't available for this group. So why try to overemphasize a group that is not at full strength and lean on something that they know they've always had in reserve this season, but haven't necessarily had to go to. So I'm curious, Jones, what your stance is on that after rewatching this game. Do you think this was more of a product of them deliberately trying to get Klare involved and make him a focal point, or are you concerned about the depth Ohio State has at receiver behind its top 2 guys?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I think it's important to caveat the second part. And I'm going to start with that question, the question of the depth of the receiver room. It's really important to remember that receiving rooms and the way they actually work is not the way the depth chart works in Madden. And I need people to remember that. Like, this is not just you have 6 wide receivers and you have wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. Like, they have positions like your X, your Y, your Z, your H, and these guys practice there. And especially with young players to perform that position. I know somebody's like, well, they're all receivers. It's all the same thing, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, to perform at the level that we have come to expect from that room, like, there's a level of craft that you have to learn there. And there's a level of craft that's developed. And you don't do that by becoming a jack of all trades. It's by really leaning in. And what makes an X receiver, which is the Jeremiah Smith spot, different, work is much different from what Brandon Innes and Emeka Ibuka and JSN and those guys were doing in the slot. And that's different from what Carnell Tate was doing. And then before him, Chris Olave, and before him, like Paris Campbell. Like, you have those different body types that have they're asked to do different things. And so when you look at it and you say, why was David Adolph playing? Well, because he's the 3rd string X and the top 2 guys were out. Like, not only was Jeremiah Smith out, but Quincy Porter was out. So yeah, you could say, well, just put Brandon Innes at X. Like, no, that's not how that works. That's not like, it's not like saying, we can just swap guys around. That, like, you wouldn't say that in the defensive backfield. You wouldn't say, oh, the corners are out, let's just move Caleb Downs to corner. Like, no, we wouldn't do that. And so wide receiver is not that level. And so I think it was tough to watch because you have a 3rd string X, but you had your starting slot receiver, and there's only so much of the playbook that can highlight and really amplify the starting slot receiver. I think they try to do some things. They obviously threw the touchdown pass, which is a beautiful crossing route, a man beater to Innes, that back corner of the end zone. But, like, the Ohio State offense is not really this year designed around highlighting the slot receiver. And so I think, like, there's only so much they can really do there schematically. Although I think Innes I've been impressed with what he's done the last couple of games, caught some really contested balls, like, run some good routes. He doesn't have the, like, top end speed I think you would want from that position, certainly that Ibuka had, but, obviously a very good player. But then you look on the, the opposite side, there's no Tate. Mylan Graham didn't play, I think, at all, or maybe, like, barely at all in the first half. Like, something's going on there. So, like, you just look at it and you say, like, what's wrong with the receiver room? Like, well, the 4 of your top 5 or 6 guys, 4 guys at 2 positions. Sorry, 2 guys at 2 positions. So 4 guys are not playing. right? And so you're down to the third stringer for 2 of your 3 starting receivers. And so, yes, you did have that. Now, the counterpoint to that is, what do you do in that situation as a play caller? And I think this was one of those good to see developmental from Brian Hartline as the play caller, right? And as the guy sitting there up in the booth and being prepared for what are we going to do as this game goes on, and getting concepts out there to highlight and to get Max Klare in good position. So understanding and recognizing, how are they defending Klare? Who are they putting him in? When are they in man coverage? When are they in zone? Who are the bodies? What are the routes that are going to work? And I thought they did an excellent job of scheming him open. And then, Sayan, of course, trusts him more than he obviously does some of the other players out there. And so that's where I think you saw this week, this is what happens when you have a guy that you trust and you have a scheme that can allow for him to get open. And most importantly, a play caller who knows when and how to dial those concepts up.
Well, that's an encouraging answer relative to Hartline. It'll be interesting to see in wake of Chip Kelly's dismissal if he goes the route of Kevin Wilson and ends up coming back as an analyst to
Come home, Dad.
support.
Come home.
Yeah. Come on back, Charles. We'd love to have you back. But yeah, I would also say for anybody, freaking him out about the future of the Ohio State receiving room, just remember that Jeremiah Smith is obligated to come back next season. And I don't know if you heard of this guy, but Chris Henry Jr. is coming down the pike, and that guy's pretty good too. So
I'm not too worried about the long-term depth of that position. Let's just be clear.
Well, no, you're not. But like I said, there's coming out of this game, because we're always looking for something to freak out about as Ohio State fans. There's a contingent of the lunatic fringe that is saying, what are we going to do after Tate leaves and Smith leaves? And, it's all this game has exposed Ohio State. We need Hartline to get back to his previous role. He can't be offensive coordinator. He's spread too thin. So that certainly doesn't seem to be the case, but we've waxed poetic enough on the offense. I know that you were chomping at the bit to get into what the defense did to ruin Rutgers' day this past game. Fire away, Jones. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I think we haven't seen as much schematic diversity from Matt Patricia the last month, and I think a lot of that is probably just due to who they're playing, right? And I think early in the season, what I really enjoyed was watching the different things he was doing up front, different looks, different personnel groups. Obviously, they've settled into this, 5-1, the penny look, where you've got, Cade McDonald as the nose, just ruining centers days, and then you've got Arvell Reese lined up as a stand-up out, defensive end for all intents and purposes. Like, he's a defensive end, not a linebacker, guys. Like, it's okay. We can admit that, but he's great. But like, it is what it is. Like, let's just be real. Let's be adults. But it's working. And like, they really played that front a ton the last month, and they continue to do so against Rutgers. It was what they did on the back end. That this was the first game in a while where you went, oh, let's turn on the tape. There's some interesting stuff going on back here. And I think, it was highlighted on the broadcast. You had that, a big receiver, again, a big X receiver. They're different types, guys. The big X receiver that caused those mismatch problems. And Rutgers has been able to throw the ball this year. They've been efficient with it, at least. And some of the stuff you saw was like, whoa, oh, okay, this was
fun. The only game of the year where Ohio State was outmatched by the receivers
right,
on the
exactly.
other side.
And you went, oh, that's right. This is a guy who he knows how to game plan for good receivers. Like, that's right. I forgot he has all this in his bag. And you saw a lot of really interesting stuff on the back end. They played a lot of variations of cover 2 and not just like disguising it pre-snap and then, we're going to play cover 2. Like, we're going to move everybody, line up one way, and then we're just kind of playing the same. It was like different versions of cover 2, if you will. They would have a corner dropping deep half, and then they'd have a safety rolling over to essentially double. And honestly, it looked a lot like some of like, people are going to hate this, especially this week, but like the Marv game plans that Michigan put out, where you were just like, okay, they're bracketing, and they're not just bracketing, they're bracketing different ways. Like, they're basically finding ways to put 2 defenders on 1 receiver, and just taking away that half of the field and making the quarterback go, what do I do now? Like, I'm not sure what to do with this. And what even are you running? And oh, wait, all of a sudden Caden Curry's in my lap. Right. And like, credit to Caden Curry, played his absolute tail off. Like, what a performance, not just in the pass rush. Like, there was a 4th and 1 in the first half of the tape. Like, yes, the interior of the line collapsed, but it was Caden Curry who made the play in the backfield. Like, absolute stud. Um, but you just saw interesting schematic stuff for the first time in a little while. And I think going into, the postseason, as we start to really ramp up the competition, that's really obviously encouraging to see, like, this defensive backfield just operating at a super high level and playing different things. It's not just like, it's not like 2019 where it was, man, there's just dogs back there and they're going to play cover one and dare you to beat them. Like, yeah, there are dogs, but like they're going to do all kinds of things and they're going to mess with your head and they're going to throw things around and you're going to be sitting back there as a quarterback going, what now? What? This is the Big Ten, not the NFC East. Like, what are we doing?
It's funny you say that because I think there's a lot of parallels between Davison Igbinosun and Damon Arnett Jr. And not just because they both wore number 1 and played outside corner, but yeah, but you didn't get to talk about your favorite play of the game.
Well,
I set you up for it at the beginning.
I know. That's because I wanted to make sure we set it up perfectly this way. I knew I could count on you. And that was really like the highlight of the whole day was I thought it was really great. No, Caden Curry was awesome. 2 is so special, guys. Like, I'm going to just take 2 minutes here and talk about how good he is. When you watch him on film, there's no false steps. Like, he doesn't like delay, he doesn't like wait, like he goes and it's a straight line. In the straight line, the angle's perfect. And it's just, nobody does that. Like, I think people like think that's how it works. That's how you draw it on a whiteboard. That's never how it works in reality, unless you're that guy. And to have it week after week after week be like this, like, I've been doing this job for 11 Warriors now for over a decade. There's only a handful of players that I can remember where I turn on the film every week and I'm just like, I get a smile, just like, oh, this dude's watching, like, showing up again. Like, we all joke, like, I was like that way with Draymond Jones from the day because, no one was like really into 3 technique defensive tackles. And I was like, no, this guy's like wrecking plays. Like, you can have your Sam Hubbard. Give me that guy. Like, he's the one I want. But like Downs is just another level of that. And I'm going to miss him when he's, not here next year because he's absolutely deserving to go be the face of a franchise.
Wave goodbye to him while you can.
And that's exactly it because, man, talk about going out on a high note. I don't think he walked for senior day. Obviously he could have because everyone knows he's not coming back, nor should he. But his final snap in Ohio Stadium, I'm pretty sure, was that perfectly timed a quarterback sack. It was a beautiful double-A blitz. It was kind of actually something that like UCLA had run the week prior where they, put Reese and Styles just in the A gaps and they blitz. And I mean, bat out of hell, perfect timing. I mean, he timed the snap perfectly, did not break stride. Like I said, there's no false steps. Like, I know people compared him on the broadcast to Ed Reed. Like, if you remember Troy Polamalu and just what an absolute tornado.
You're talking to a Steelers fan. Like, yeah, that was exactly where I was going to go with the comparison.
And he's the only guy I can remember. They're like, I'm sorry, Downs is the only guy that I can think of like that has that thing where you're just like, wait, what is that guy doing in the bottom left corner of the screen? And holy cow, how did he just get in the backfield? How did he do that? And he sees angles and he has great timing and just body control that nobody else has. And I don't think it's totally appreciated because we're focused on everything else, understandably. And it doesn't necessarily guarantee success because he's just one of 11 guys on the field. Obviously, he has a lot of responsibility, but from a finite amount of time we've got left to watch number 2, I hope people, when you're watching on Saturday, just find 2 and watch him. He's not always going to make the split tackle, but I promise you he's going to be moving and somewhere around the ball. And it's just a pleasure to watch. And, I feel really lucky that I get to get entitled to spend a lot of time studying him because he's a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, it feels like he was safety is such an interesting position because I always think that in terms of like elevating a defense from like great to elite, that position has the most potential X factor, even more so than anywhere in the front 7 of the box. Because when you're a safety, you're put in so many positions where you can either make a big play yourself or give up a big play to the other team. And he just does not give up big play. I know he had a bad national championship game, all things considered, last season, but you take away that Notre Dame game, he has consistently been in a position of success for this defense in just about every single snap he's taken at Ohio State. It's been nothing short of phenomenal. all of the I don't want to put him on Hall of Fame trajectory like the Palomalu comparison that we just invoked, but all of those safeties that make names for themselves like that guy, they all have that kind of elite timing where they know exactly where they're supposed to be at the right time. And that is what allows them to make plays that end up changing the course of the game. And he could, and you're completely right. That pursuit and that blitz could not have been executed any better to where he just got in untouched and was able to have that nice poetic wave to the student
Yeah, just
section on his
wave to
way
the
out of
student
Ohio
section,
State.
make that you're going like, come on, man. Like that's like what a way to end. I know he's got a lot of football left to play, but like what a way to go out at home, man. Like perfect ending.
Certainly. And it feels like he's somehow more underappreciated last season. He was fresh in Columbus and he was coming off the massive freshman campaign at Alabama. So everybody, we knew how good the ESPN had already hyped him enough while he was at Alabama that it was undeniable. He couldn't come to Ohio State and then the SEC propaganda arm. The cat was already out of the bag. Like everybody across the nation already knew how good he was, and he was going into Jim Knowles' defense, and it was like, okay, he's going to be a difference maker for Ohio State. It somehow feels like he's more underappreciated this year just because the big talking point has obviously been the skyrocketing stock of Arvell Reese. And then I also think that a lot of people have been very fond of talking. Given most people were, I think, concerned about the defensive line as a whole coming into this season, and like the resurgence of Larry Johnson in some respects relative to what's been gotten out of Caden McDonald, who is quietly turning into my favorite player on the defense. I mean, it's hard enough I talked about how hard it is for a safety to get recognition. It's easier for a safety than it is for an interior defensive lineman. If you're not an Ndamukong Suh level game wrecker, you're very rarely getting the recognition you deserve. My favorite play of the game on Sunday was that fourth down you invoked where, yeah, Curry made the play, but that play doesn't happen if McDonald doesn't absorb a double team off the jump and everything just starts kind of like falling apart from there. This defense has game wreckers at all three levels of it, and it's why it is not only a championship level defense, but somehow has improved upon the unit that they had last year, and it's reflected in the historical pace that they've been on relative to scoring and everything. Yeah, I get why you could talk about this defense for
Exactly.
days. Nobody can blame you. It's certainly the most fun subject to talk about relative to Ohio State football this year. Before you get out of here, one last question I want to ask you is that relative to some of the late season concerns that we've had as a whole, obviously the most important games are yet to come in the college football playoff. But for homegrown Ohio State fans like myself, the most important thing in the world is happening this weekend. So, how concerned are you relative to your late season concerns and the fact that there hasn't, like, this is a measurable step up in competition? For whatever slander we want to throw Michigan's way, they're certainly a more complete team, one that is one's that competing for a college football playoff spot this weekend than the competition Ohio State has faced of late. This is a step up. It's in their own house. There's a lot of reasons to be concerned, but specifically relative to what you've been worried about, I wonder how confident are you feeling that Ohio State has done enough to rectify those issues you've spoken about of late, relative to the opponent that they're playing this weekend, and do you think they'll be able to overcome those challenges and get a victory?
I mean, you can never be too confident about anything in this game. I think last year obviously showed that. Um,
Yeah,
the offensive line played better this week. That's the biggest concern I've had. Obviously, Michigan's good up front. They have been for years. And you just wonder, is this another bad execution game? I think from a talent perspective, there's obviously not a Graham and Grant that can just, move people, that you're not dealing with that this year. But scheme wise, there's still talent. They're going to play hard. And I'm sure there's going to be some there's going to be some blown execution in the run game. And it is what it is. But I feel I'm more encouraged after this past week. I thought it was the best game we've seen from 77 in a long time. I thought he was very good. I think the series when Van Sickle was in for him was the only 3 and out of the day, and Van Sickle did not cover himself in glory. I know Andy came on last week and talked about it. tough look for 58 this week because
Yeah, tough
70.
look for me too. We
Yeah,
featured him for an episode last week.
77 must have. I mean, I thought Shabola really responded really well to that. I thought he played very well. I think they figured a few things out in the run game, and thank God they finally started to spread it out to run, which I've been waiting for all year. Please stop doing the 2 and 3 tight ends and being cute. Like even in this game where they're down their receivers, are like, actually, you know what works best? Let's spread out. Let's put Max Klare in the slot and then let's run the ball. And guess what? That was when they were the most effective. And so I do wonder how much we're going to start seeing more of that. Like that seems to be a little bit of the we've been waiting and holding it back and holding it back and holding it back. Now it's time to break tendency. And I think that's what I'm most excited for this week is that like, on one hand, you can say like Ohio State hasn't shown a ton. And, the analogy is like they've been in third gear all year. Well, what happens when you drop it in fourth and fifth? What does that actually mean? And I think it's the tendency breakers. It's, we're going to spread you out with 4 wide and then we're going to run power. Like, oh, you haven't done that all year. Exactly. And this is when we do it, is we're saving some of those, tendency breakers, the opposite of what you anticipate, starting to mess with you from a formation perspective. I think they've held all of that back. And I think last year they did the same thing for this game, but figured we're just going to, we don't need to put that in the game plan. We should be fine. Let's save that for Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. And that clearly came back to bite them. I got to think that they've learned from that, given everything that happened. I would imagine that this is a game where they go, let's get an early lead. Let's be aggressive early, try to get that touchdown lead, 2 touchdown lead, whatever that is. If Ohio State gets up 2 scores, I don't see a world where Michigan can realistically come back against this defense. I'm not saying that Michigan can't move the ball or they can't score, but I think with how good and how physical this defense is and how many answers they have, you think about, well, what's the most dangerous part of Michigan? It's Nick Marsh, and then it's, Underwood doing things with his legs. Well, okay, put Reese and Styles and Downs keeping eyes on him every play. Like I feel pretty good about that as a solution. and and that's better than, Northwestern spying him and whoever they've got. And so, I think that's where you start to say if Ohio State can get a 10-point lead, essentially, I think that might be it. Like I just don't think that Michigan is built the way it is this year is built to overcome that. And then Ohio State can really kind of run the game script that they want at that point. But you never know, man. Sayan's been great all year. He's been great at avoiding pressure and staying out of trouble. Weird things happen in this game. I think everybody knows it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to reserve most of my thoughts on it for when I preview the game with Johnny later this week. But I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I would expect them to have a game plan that's similar here to what they did against Washington in terms of corralling a mobile quarterback threat. And I've watched a handful of Michigan games this year, and I think that Bryce Underwood is more dangerous than I think a lot of Ohio State fans want to admit, just because everybody's been wanting to dump cold water on the Portnoy preseason comment that he's the greatest freshman quarterback ever. It's obviously not the case, but I still think that he's better than a lot of Ohio State fans want to give him credit for, and he's probably like a deep ball away from being extremely dangerous. The thing is, he's just never figured out the touch yet on throwing 15 yards consistently, or beyond 15 yards rather, this season. I think from within there, he's very good. But if they collapse the defense, if they have the safeties playing closer up, everybody's within 15 yards of the line of scrimmage, and they've got Reese kind of serving that same spy role that he did against Washington, I think they're going to be able to mitigate a lot of what Michigan wants to do.
Last thing I'll say to that point, and I'll leave you with this: win first down. I know everybody says win third down. There's a couple games ago where I said it was all about second down. Against this team, win first down. Because if you win first down and put this Michigan offense behind schedule, then you can run all that fun stuff I talked about with Patricia. You have to force them into being a drop back pass team, whether that's on second or third down. And then you can change the picture and do all of those things to mess with all the talent in the world. He's still a freshman quarterback, and he hasn't faced a defense that moves the picture quite like this. So that's why it's critical. You cannot allow what happened last year, which was give up 4 yards, give up 4 yards, give up 3 yards, first down, give up 3 yards, give up 4 yards, give up 3 yards, first down. Right. And that's how Michigan stayed in the game last year with a similar offense. And I think this year it's about you have to be aggressive early. You have to force into second long, have to force into third and long.
Yeah, neither of these teams have quite faced a challenge like this that the other poses to the other side to this point in the season. So I'm expecting it to be a little bit more of a tight game early than maybe some other people are hoping for. I know that probably plays into what Michigan wants. So yeah, I think it is going to be a tighter game than most people would want for the first half. But I think that they're going to figure some things out in the second half, ideally, and it'll, things will open up. I think the potential for Ohio State to open up is a lot more, given just how airtight the defense has been for the
Correct.
Buckeyes this year. So we do have that to look forward to, and you've got, as I said earlier, a film study to look forward to on Thursday. Dubcast will be off that day, but we will be back tomorrow with Dan Hope, and then we will be back on Black Friday to preview the Michigan game with the Dub father himself, Johnny Ginter. Until then, Jones, thank you very much for joining me on the Dubcast this week. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks to our sponsor, First Bank of Central Ohio, and we'll be back with Dan tomorrow for the Thanksgiving Eve episode. Until then, we'll see you soon, and take care, folks.
Make your field goals.